Greetings and God bless. Welcome to another episode of Pass the Mic. I am one of your hosts, Dr. Jemar Tisby, and I am joined again by a special guest, but he's not really a guest. He almost needs no introduction, but since you don't often hear him on the mic or see him on the camera, welcome to Pass the Mic, Beau York.
Thank you very much. I don't think I've ever been on camera before, at least not on Pass the Mic. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Well, folks, this is a first. If you're listening, pause it, tune into the YouTube channel, and you can see the Wizard of Oz.
Oh, man.
Yeah.
Wait. That's like the villain of the story, man.
Yeah, I've not seen Wicked, but the guy behind the curtain, of course, Beau is our podcast producer, long time and award-winning podcast producer.
Well, thank you very much.
Thank you for joining the show.
Hey, to be here with Mr. Three Time, I'm very excited because, of course, we're right after, a couple weeks after the release of Spirit of Justice.
It's still new. Yeah, Spirit of Justice is out in the world. Get it wherever books are sold. I keep playing with the messaging on this book.
Oh,
so lately, and I blame Ryan Gentry for this, our video producer. It's the Black history they never taught you.
Oh, that's good.
That's one of them.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
So we made this awesome
and
video
you won't
essay.
hear anywhere else.
And you won't hear anywhere else.
Right. They're trying to keep it. They're trying to keep this from you.
The man is trying to suppress this history. But really and truly, some of the initial feedback has consistently been, I never knew this. I had not heard this story. I'm fascinated by it. So I think even apart from the sort of spiritual and justice messages, for people who just want to know more about Black history, the Spirit of Justice has over 50 different profiles. What was I thinking? I'm glad nobody told me that. I was going to have to profile 50 different people before I started writing it, but it's all there. So it's go to thespiritofjustice.com if you want to learn more. All that. Thank you for the cue up.
Absolutely.
But this is about something else. So we were just at an event at Fuller Seminary Houston campus.
Right.
And there was a question in the audience, and I don't even remember what the exact question was.
No, so this is interesting because I think it was more of like a tee up for you to kind of choose what you wanted to talk about, or rather, like what had been on your mind a lot lately. And it's funny because I don't quite remember the first thing, but it wasn't anything new. I'd heard it a couple times.
It was like a question like, what does this cost you? What is this
that's right. Yeah. It was, what does this cost you? And so you've talked about, obviously, even on this podcast, you've talked several times about work opportunities, relationships that are there, that sort of thing.
Money. Yeah. Y'all costing me money.
Please support the show on Patreon, especially because Patreon's about to do a bunch of different weird things. So your support is very, very welcome. But that was the first thing. But the second one, I feel like I've only recently heard you mention.
Yeah.
And really almost more privately, and just you've kind of recently been talking about this more publicly. And that is, this work has cost you trust.
Yes. So first of all, you're going to try to make it all deep and emotional. But listen.
This is why you didn't want to do this with me.
We actually tried to record this episode before, but I think we're going to nail it this time.
I think we got it this
time.
Yeah.
So they asked, what has this work cost you? And in that event, I said, this work has cost me trust. It's harder to trust people because I've been betrayed so many times. And so since it's such like a clunky, nuanced topic, I thought it would be good if we hopped on the mic and you asked me questions because you're good at that stuff.
Yeah,
and then we'll see what happens.
So I'll just go ahead and do the thing that I do, which is push you to say the thing that gets you canceled. So when you say it's forced you to lose trust for people, do you want to make that more specific, Jemar?
Here we go. Already hot and spicy. Lose trust. Specifically with white people, although there is a nuance to that, and there are people of color in that mix as well.
Right.
So I would say, particularly around the 2014 to 2016 era, I'm in seminary. I am an intern at our church in Jackson, Mississippi. I am, full on going toward ordination, pastoring a local church. And then Black Lives Matter hits. And
can we pause it for just a second?
Yeah.
Because I think this context is important, right? Like, so you mentioned, of course, it was our church, but this is Central Mississippi. But it's not just Central Mississippi. It's our church, which is itself a multi-ethnic church, professed and seeking to be a multi-ethnic church. And Jackson, Mississippi is notable not just for the fact that it is Central Mississippi, but because of its proximity to Reformed Theological Seminary that's there as well. So it's like there's an intersection of a lot of different factors that kind of go into the setting.
Black pastor, all of that.
Yep.
And I think this is on the tail end of an era of racial reconciliation when it was popular. when it was mostly, acceptable on the up and up.
Yeah.
I think one of the things that really takes a turn is Black Lives Matter, because now we're talking about structural issues. Now we're talking about not just a few bad apples in law enforcement. We're talking about law enforcement as a system. We're talking about the decades-long history of Black people being brutalized by the people charged to serve and protect. Now we're catching it on cell phone video. All of these things are happening. And we move beyond can we get, this is how I put it, different hues in the pews, different, racial and ethnic background, all in the same place on Sunday morning. And we're getting to, quality of life. It's hard for me to maneuver in this society as a Black person. When I see those flashing blue lights, it's an existential moment of panic for me. And white people, can you understand that? And then it's this, Black Lives Matter. Well, blue lives matter. All lives matter. But then we get really personal, right? So it's people who have supported me thus far. They've supported me in forming the Reformed African American Network. They've made calls, they've made introductions. It's people who supported me in forming the African American Leadership Initiative at Reformed Theological Seminary, very conservative seminary. This has to go all the way up to the board to get approved, and they approve it. Why? Because they're thinking racial reconciliation. It's a good thing to have Black people here, and let's talk about coming together. They're not thinking justice. And I just went to all these conversations that I had with folks one-on-one, like we're doing now. We'd be at a restaurant or something, and people sort of privately saying, yeah, this is right, this is good. But then when I start speaking up about justice and maybe there is a problem with police brutality, all of those same people, I become a pariah. Suddenly, they don't want to associate with me anymore for fear of getting contaminated. We often talk about this radioactive, but I think if we pull that analogy apart, there's a lot of truth to it, because if you get too close to something that's radioactive, you become irradiated, right?
Right. There's an element. You'll have to forgive me for this.
You're gonna nerd out. Let's
go.
A little
Let's
bit.
Go. So Encanto, Disney film.
Yeah.
We don't talk about Bruno. Why don't we talk about Bruno? Because Bruno was addressing what was going on around us. And he saying oh, this is going to happen. This is going to happen. He was truth telling about everything that was going on, but we don't want this, because now it's no, you're making this happen. So now we got to cast out Bruno. And ultimately, what is Bruno trying to do? He's not doing this out of any kind of hatred for his family. He's just saying no, I see what's happening. And then later on, what do we see with oh man, I'm forgetting the main character's name, but the main character, she's starting to see the cracks in the house, and she's addressing it, and she's starting to be put in that Bruno category. Wow. And what does she want? It's not that she hates her family, it's that she's no, we have to address this because this is going to destroy us. Right?
I was not expecting the Encanto connection, but that's brilliant. I think it's right on point, because they're not causing the issue, they're pointing it out and then being blamed for causing it.
Right.
And so the exact words in many cases for me and folks like me was, you're being divisive. The reason why we can't get over this race stuff is because you keep bringing it up. You keep talking about it and talking about it in certain ways, right? So there's that. And we can get into the specific stories. One of the things that really hurts is, and makes it hard to trust people, they support you in private but not in public.
Okay.
Have you ever had that?
Yeah.
It's I agree with. Oh, we were talking about Nicodemus before.
Right. Okay. So we were talking about the multiple ways to read the Nicodemus story, and there is an element of that. We were talking about it from a different angle, but that is an angle to look at as well.
Yeah.
As Nicodemus, as a supporter of Jesus, but maybe when nobody's looking
in the background.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. So I feel and this is my whole thing about complicity. It's not the majority that's doing the most outrageous, egregious things, but it is the majority that's not doing anything about it. And one of the ways not to do anything about it is, I really believe in what you're talking about, Jemar, with this racial justice stuff, but I can't say that.
Yeah.
If I said that to my congregation, to my seminary, to my group, they would not respond. They would kick me out. I wouldn't have a voice in there anymore, right? And here's the justification that a lot of people use. It's strategic silence. So if what I'm doing is I'm building political capital in these spaces, and eventually I'll talk about this when I have enough trust and clout in the organization. Maybe there's some wisdom to that. You certainly shouldn't be a bull in a China shop, so to speak, and just go rip roaring in with your truth bombs.
Sure.
There's a pastoral element to truth telling. At the same time, I suspect that for a lot of these folks, that day of truth telling never really comes.
See, that's the thing. It's great and strategic if you are applying it strategically, but if you never actually apply that, then it's just preservation. There's nothing. The only thing that's strategic is for you, in terms of self-preservation, as opposed to actually,
100%.
doing any action there. Yeah,
and it's like Uriah. I got all my folks with me, and then they withdraw.
Right.
And you're left on your own to deal with all the attacks and all the onslaught. That's a sense of betrayal. And so what it looks like now is, I think like a lot of Black people, and this is just on the race front, you could take any other sort of justice issue and it might be true, is I got to know what kind of white person you are. And I think that's earned skepticism.
Sure.
So a lot of people would listen to that. A lot of trolls listening. I don't care. A lot of people would listen to that and say, well, Jemar's being racist. He doesn't trust white people because they're white. No, I don't trust white people because of history and experience. Initially, right? Don't get just that sound, people. I don't trust white people. I don't trust white people. I have a healthy distance until I can figure out what your angle is, whether I can actually rely on you, whether who you are in our private conversation is who you are in your predominantly white church or Bible study is who you are online and on social media and in public.
Right. I wonder if to kind of give a little bit of an interesting spin on it. Perhaps it's the I don't trust white people. Maybe it's more of I trust the system to produce the thing that it says it's going to produce. Right.
Yeah,
from that
absolutely.
standpoint, it's acknowledging kind of a system of white supremacy. Yeah. And how do you navigate that in terms of figuring out, okay, who here is in the system or of the system or out of the system or fighting the system? Like what from that standpoint.
And trust is not, I'm not kind to you. I cuss you out when I meet you. I avoid talking to you. That's not what I'm talking about. What I'm talking about is, will I be vulnerable with you?
You won't be vulnerable with anybody, Jemar. Can we talk about that?
A pure outright lie. But it does take a while.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Because when I was having these heart-to-heart conversations over coffee or, since we were Presbyterian, bourbon,
Right, cigars.
I was opening up and it seemed like none of that made a difference when it really mattered. Because what happened was they said I had changed.
Right.
My theology had changed, or the Grove City thing. The Jemar we invited in 2020 is not the Jemar we got in 2021.
Right.
I was like, yeah, it is. But you put your fears and your shift to the right on me. And that felt like a stab in the back, right? And then we talked at the top of the show about, actually, for me, it's not even just about white people. There are Black people, particularly Black men. I am wary. I am curious when I see Black men continue to be in these predominantly white circles that have shown a reticence toward racial progress. See how politely I'm putting that?
Yeah.
I am wondering, especially now in 2024, after all we've seen, what is your interest in being in these places? What does it do for you to be in these spaces? And how can we relate? Because these are some of the same places that burned me, is what I'm saying.
Sure.
Right? And a lot of these folks, these circles aren't huge. They know what happened. So you know what went down, and yet you're still like associating positively with these folks. And I'm not saying there's anything nefarious. I'm just curious.
Yeah.
I wonder.
Well, and there's a whole nother element here. Obviously, as two men speaking. I mean, and not to I would never presume to speak for Black women, but I do think there's a lot of Black women that would say, "Hey, Black men, we're right with you when we're fighting for racial justice." But when we see some misogyny war come up, we don't know who we can trust in this.
100%. So a lot of these patriarchal, misogynist, male-dominated spaces. As black men, we've got to answer to black women, as well as men in general. We got to answer to women for that. And I would understand if women looked at me associating in some of these circles, if there were any. I hope not. But they're like, well, what are you about, Jemar? Are you for us?
Right.
As women? Are you for us as black women, right?
You know, it's an interesting thing when it comes to like trust or being in kind of a questionably trusted category. And I know this as somebody, a father who's very active in my children's life, right? Mm-hmm. Like when I show up to a school in the middle of the day to get my kids, and especially if it's a new school, they don't really know me, I know like I'm not a trusted individual. Or like if all of a sudden some random kid comes up to me and is starting to talk to me, I'm like, I don't know what to do with this situation because I don't want if I don't want anybody to presume that something inappropriate is happening. Right. But it's what I find fascinating is the people that get really upset because you presume that of them are the ones that you should kind of be like,
exactly. Yeah.
Okay, do you not see? Are you not aware of this situation being potentially a bad situation? Are you more concerned with your like the way you feel about this or the way you might be judged?
Yeah,
exactly. And that puts people at risk when you're not really addressing.
I think you nailed it. It reminds me of this thing that went around on social media for a while. For women, would you rather encounter a bear or a man?
Right,
in the woods, right?
Yeah.
And so much of it is like the bear.
And he goes, "What's wrong with you? Why wouldn't you want? I can't believe you're gonna be eaten by a bear."
Yeah, that dude is sus. If that's your response,
exactly.
Right? So in a similar vein, for white folks who are like, "How dare Jemar? How dare he say he doesn't trust me because I'm white?" Well, that in itself, that response,
right,
rather than I didn't think about that.
Yeah.
I wasn't aware of sort of my impact of being in this demographic, how that might affect someone who's historically been oppressed by this demographic.
There you go.
That's, I think, what the heart of this issue is.
So you've got such a unique experience because when it comes to trust, there's an institutional element, but there's also an individual element. I want to get more into that right after this break.
Well, greetings and God bless, family. This is your host of Pastor Mike, Tyler Burns, and I am so excited that we're still doing Pastor Mike 11 years after we started. Think about this. 11 years after we started, we're still doing this. And the reason why we can do it is because people like you have supported us from the beginning. We would not still be here if not for the support of people who are our patrons. And if you go to patreon.com/Pastor Mike, if this podcast has helped you in any way, shape, or form, if we've encouraged you to think more deeply about race and justice, if we've inspired you to make change right where you are, if we've been an oasis in the desert in the midst of toxic church spaces, we need your help. We need your support. For just a few dollars every single month, you can keep us going. You literally, as our listeners, keep us going. So head to patreon.com/Pastor Mike. We're passing the mic to you for your support so that we can continue doing this podcast that so many people love. Thank you so much for your support. If you are already a patron, and if you're not, just a few dollars a month. Thank you so much.
And we're back on Pass the Mic. Jemar is opening up and telling us why he doesn't trust white people. I'm just kidding. Please don't.
There's a little more to the story. A little more to the story.
But as I was saying before the break, because of the work that you've done, because of the spaces you've been in, when it comes to this trust element, I think there's the larger institutionalized mistrust, which you've kind of talked about, and is very understandable. But there's a very personal element as it relates to individual relationships, and kind of unpack that. I mean, to the extent that you feel comfortable, and you don't have to name names, but can you share some of those experiences?
I mean, there's so many. So seminary, right? I'm in class with these guys, and we're basically a cohort. So we've got multiple classes together over multiple years. We're getting to know each other well. We lift weights together. We play ultimate frisbee together. We go to church sometimes together. We pray together. All of those things that really make you feel like you're connected with someone. Then I start doing the African American Leadership Initiative at the seminary. I start doing Reformed African American Network, writing and speaking about racial justice, and come to find out, these folks hop in my comments online and they're like, Jemar, you're wrong. And that stung more than the anonymous, person who I don't know.
These aren't even DMs reaching out personally.
No.
Yeah.
These are public comments from people I sit next to in class. These are folks who I've listened to preach. I've supported them in different ways, and they've supported me prior to this. And now I come to find out, it feels like a bait and switch.
Right.
It feels like, oh, we were connected relationally, but now when I get to a real deep core identity piece of who I am, we couldn't be further apart. As a matter of fact, you're attacking me.
Can we talk about how social media also, to some extent, like using social media to dehumanize somebody in that moment? You know what I mean? Because like there is even though, you know, we've got the public profiles and everything, there's an anonymous nature that is put into like a comment. And especially when you have every single opportunity to talk to this person, to hit them from like a social media post, it feels dehumanizing.
It's very deep. It depersonalizes the whole thing,
for sure,
right? Because these folks, you could talk to me in class, right outside, right after class. You could, maybe you had my phone number. You could email me. Like there were personal, direct ways to get in touch with me. Instead, I got to see your comment on my post about whatever, right? Or it just comes back to me through the grapevine, through hearsay, but it's actual truth.
Right,
like, but you hear it from someone else, and you're like, well, if they had this issue, why didn't they just talk to me? And so much, I think, of what's so hard to trust about people is wondering, well, if they do have an issue, will they come to me with it, or will they just talk behind my back? So you never know after an encounter, like how people will respond, kind of a thing.
I guess the comment section is like behind my back in public, which is
behind
like
my back in public. Yeah. Like, but you're bold online, but not in person, right?
Right.
They were accusing Paul.
Man, we got some stories there, don't we?
Exactly. There was another instance where someone from the seminary who was on staff. This is when I don't even remember the specific event that happened, but it was a big kerfluffle at the moment in public around me. And it was one of those quasi support you in private, but I can't say anything publicly.
Sure.
And the specific line was, well, hear him out. Hear Jemar out. And what got me about that, because it sounds innocuous, but what got me about that was it was a clear case of nothing I was saying was wrong. It was racists or colorblind racists who didn't get it and were pushing back. And so when he said, hear him out, what he didn't say was, Jemar's not wrong. Or what is there to disagree about what he said? There was no hint of actually challenging the people who were challenging me, because it's not about me ultimately. It's about this issue, and it's about justice. So was I on the wrong side of justice, or were they? And if they were, why wouldn't you say it?
Right.
Why would you just say, well, we got to hear both sides?
Well, he's giving you a platform. But yeah, I mean, the argument is like, well, it's also kind of setting you up to the firing range. It's like, wait, hang on. Let him get in place.
Right, exactly. That's what it sounded like. Don't start firing yet. Let him get in the center.
Right,
okay, very good. Now go.
You're welcome.
So the tepid support also makes it hard to trust, right? Like, it's not about, do you like Jemar or not? It's about what's the right thing. And whoever the spokesperson is, are you supporting this because it's the right thing? Or because it's a quote unquote controversial issue, you take a step back, hands off, and you assuage your conscience by saying, well, I'm not part of the firing squad. I'm just going to say, maybe he has a point. Listen to him. At least give him a hearing. But it's not, I'm going to get up there with him because he does have a point. And it's you all, if you want to pull the trigger, go ahead. But that doesn't make you right. So that makes it hard to trust.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure that's called a, there's a legal term for that. Complicit, I believe, is actually the word.
Bystander, right? So that's part of it.
That's what Seinfeld went to jail on the last episode of the Seinfeld series.
It is a legal thing. Like if you have the opportunity to intervene when wrongdoing is occurring and you don't, you have some culpability in that situation.
Yeah, I mean, what do we pray at church every single Sunday? Forgive me for what I have done and what I have failed
Yes, what I failed to do. Sins of commission and omission.
That's right.
So all of that adds up to when, so this is the deeper emotional part, right? Like me being very hesitant to say this is a safe person, even when they've demonstrated they are, right? So that's on me. That's the healing I have to do is, this is a trauma response to years and years of, feeling like I'm getting stabbed in the back by brothers and sisters in Christ, such that when people do, sometimes go out of their way, they make all the caveats. They say, hey, I know I'm white and I don't mean to, impose. You don't have to share anything you don't feel comfortable with, whatever it might be, however they couch it. And more than in words, through their actions, right? They're there. They support my work in various ways, all of those kinds of things. It's still the sort of flinch, the emotional flinching.
Well, it kind of goes into the conversation that we had last time I was on the show. But like, to me, it's almost like the more somebody apologizes for being white, the more like, be careful.
Right.
They haven't done a lot of work here.
It can go overboard.
Yeah.
But also, it's on me, even though I've been victimized in a lot of ways, to take ownership of my healing. And so that's where I am trying to work on it. And actually it comes down to, do I trust God? So much of what I learned about God came through these white Christian, white evangelical spaces, such that when I experienced these betrayals on a sub-level that I'm not sure I was even conscious of, did I feel betrayed by God? God, I committed myself to this reconciliation thing, this Bible stuff about all of us being one, and the only thing I got was hurt. And can I trust you, God, with the most vulnerable parts of me?
Wow.
The answer, of course, is yes, but there's a big difference. There's a big distance between your head and your heart when you say, I can trust God. And so in prayer, in Bible reading, in opening myself up to God, I've had to work through trust issues as well. But as I do that with a therapist, with support from people I can trust, but as I do that, as I become even more vulnerable with God, which means being honest with myself, then I can trust people. And here's the thing about trust that I'm learning. You might still get hurt. Even by trustworthy people. I know I hurt people, never intending to. And I hope that in general, I'm a trustworthy person with, important things. But trust also means forgiving when people are humble and contrite, all that stuff. And putting yourself out there again and not becoming so ossified, so closed up that you protect yourself from some hurt, but you also close yourself up from joy, connection.
Jemar, you got real open with us right now. Thank you for that. This is a special moment right now.
I know there are people listening who maybe haven't put it in those words yet, but you've kind of retreated from relationships. This could be because of racial issues, gender issues, or just
church trauma.
Trauma. Yeah, you've retreated from that. It could be just an individual interpersonal thing. And so I'm working through it. I'm not an expert on it, but I want white people to know, like, racism has real personal consequences. It's not just the big, broad societal inequality stuff. It is emotional pain that makes it difficult to form connections with other people. And I also want Black people and other people of color to know there is no relationship on this earth, aside from with Jesus, where you can guarantee you won't get hurt. So if you're waiting for the perfectly trustworthy person who will never hurt you, you'll never open yourself up. That's not the litmus test. The litmus test is really your relationship with yourself and with Jesus. Do you trust Jesus to heal you through the hurt? That will inevitably come. do you trust yourself to have the resilience to endure it and continually be open to the possibility of genuine connection?
That's good. And I'll just say this one last thing, because I mean, you mentioned, the right answer is yes. Like, like, can I trust God in this way? And I think sometimes we overly churchify things because we know what the right answer is, but we let that get in the way of what we're actually feeling.
Exactly.
And so you have to learn to trust yourself and what you're actually feeling 100%. And give yourself that space, even if it's problematic or even if it's not the right answer.
Churchy answer.
If you don't do that work and be honest with yourself, then you can't arrive where you're supposed to, where Jesus is really pulling you. So
I love it. This feels like one of those episodes of, your favorite comedy sitcom where they get real.
Yeah.
This has been a very special episode of Pass the Mic.
Wow.
Yeah. Well, thanks for doing a deep dive with us on trust and all of the things. Beau York, thank you again for joining us, not only on mic, but on camera.
I know. And it was a serious one too. I'm not nervous at all.
He's a very unserious person. No, I'm just kidding. Well, we will catch you next time on the next Pass the Mic.